A sous-chef's deadly secret sparks chaos. Welcome to Poirot Files. I am your host, Dexter. Our community rocks. Drop a note on where you're tuning in. Your words inspire me. Let's solve this together. I had just poured my second cup of coffee and was halfway through the crossword when Fritz's footsteps broke the quiet rhythm of the morning. You don't hear Fritz when he doesn't want you to. This time, he wasn't trying to be discreet. He came straight into the office with that pinched expression that means only one thing. Someone's trying to get through the front door who doesn't belong there. He says he's from the plancher, Fritz said, wrinkling his nose like someone had grated cheap parmesan in his vicinity. A kitchen worker. He insists he must speak to Mr. Wolfe directly. Now the plancher is one of those upscale fusion joints downtown where food looks like art and tastes like regret. Wolfe, naturally, would rather eat a roast calf's brain doused in vinegar than walk into a place that served foam instead of sauce. So, when a kitchen hand from there showed up, uninvited, I figured something was up. Wolfe didn't look up from the orchid he was fussing over. Send him away. He says it concerns a matter of urgency and that it might involve a crime, Fritz added reluctantly. That did it. Wolfe turned, one eyebrow lifting the way it does when something threatens to disturb his sacred schedule. A crime? He echoed. Of what nature? He didn't say, only that he couldn't trust anyone else. I glanced at the clock. It was 5 minutes before Wolfe's morning orchid ritual ended, which meant I had just enough time to head off disaster. I'll go see what this culinary Cassandra has to say. The man in question was lanky, mid-30s, and his white coat had definitely seen better shifts. Nervous energy buzzed off him like bad static. He introduced himself as Julien Duval, sous-chef at the plancher. His accent was somewhere between Montreal and pretension. I know this is irregular, he said, glancing back toward the door, like someone might be following him. But I need your Mr. Wolfe's help. I didn't. Nowhere else to go? You bypassed the police and came to a man who treats human contact like a contagious disease, I said, folding my arms. Why? Duval swallowed. Because this isn't something the police would believe, and because someone is going to die. That earned him a long pause. I gave him the once-over. His coat was stained with tomato reduction, and the sweat on his brow was fresh. Go on. It's about the kitchen, he said. About Chef Melnick and something I overheard 2 nights ago. Something about blackmail, threats, secrets. He doesn't know I heard it. I've been keeping my head down, but last night I found something in my locker that wasn't mine. A flash drive with a video. What kind of video? I didn't watch it all, just enough to know someone's in danger. I think it's why Bruno went missing. Bruno? One of our dishwashers. Young, new, he didn't show up for his shift 2 days ago. They said he quit, but he didn't even collect his paycheck. That's not like him. Now, we were firmly entering Wolfe's territory, not because of danger, but because of disorder. A chef in distress, a vanishing dishwasher, a mysterious flash drive, and the word blackmail being thrown around like a garnish. That's the kind of souffle Wolfe might find worth examining. I told Duval to wait and return to the office, where Wolfe was now reading the Gazette with a look of scorn reserved for poorly edited prose. He says there's a missing employee, a video file, and a blackmail plot involving a top chef. He thinks someone's about to be bumped off, Wolfe sighed. Foy, a kitchen scandal. He also said there's a flash drive with evidence. That got a flicker. Wolfe doesn't like electronics, but he respects hard proof. Still, he didn't move. Why come to me? Apparently, he thinks the police won't take it seriously. And he's got the kind of nerves you don't fake. He looked like a man who might sleep with the light on. Wolfe drummed his fingers on the armrest. "Show him in." I waved Duval inside, and the poor guy looked ready to be grilled, poached, and plated. Wolfe greeted him with a stare sharp enough to core an apple. "You've involved yourself in something? Why?" Duval shifted. "Because if something happens and I said nothing, I couldn't live with it." Wolfe grunted. "You are not a client. You offer neither compensation nor clarity. Still, I will hear the facts. You will leave the flash drive. You will go about your business as if you had never come here. You will speak to no one, and you will report any additional peculiarities to Mr. Goodwin immediately." Duval nodded quickly, digging the flash drive from his pocket and placing it on Wolfe's desk like it might explode. I saw Wolfe's eyes rest on it for a second, just a flicker, but I knew he had taken the bait. Whatever was on that drive, it had cracked the morning's routine, which was no small feat. Duval left, still twitching, and Wolfe sat back with a soft sigh. "Archie, load it." And just like that, the sanctity of the brownstone had been seasoned with something more than rosemary, something that smelled like fear. I'm not what you'd call a tech wizard. My idea of advanced computing is making sure the typewriter ribbon's fresh, but I do know how to plug in a flash drive and hit play. So, while Wolfe settled back with his half-lidded disdain and a bottle of that foul Montenegrine beer he likes to sip when thoughts are brewing, I inserted the drive into my office desktop and clicked on the single video file it contained. The file name was Bruno Some Footage at Final.mp4. Not ominous at all. The screen flickered. The video quality was about what you'd expect from a hidden phone camera. Grainy, off-angle, the kind of thing a nervous hand shoves behind a flower bin and hopes for the best. The audio buzzed, but it was clear enough. It opened on a narrow space, looked like the back storeroom of a restaurant, somewhere between the dry goods and a mop bucket. Two men were talking. One was easy to identify. Chef Melnick, the press, likes to call him a culinary genius. I call him a self-important ladle waver with a publicity agent. The other man had his back to the camera, but judging by the size and stance, it was Bruno, or at least someone built like him. Melnick was leaning in, voice hushed but firm. "If this gets out, it's both our necks. You weren't supposed to be in the office. You weren't supposed to touch anything." The reply was muffled. Bruno, if it was him, sounded shaken. "I didn't mean to. I saw something. I didn't take it. But I know what I saw. You can't erase that." "You saw what you weren't meant to see," Melnick snapped. "And that means now you've got a decision to make. Loyalty or consequences." The video cut off right after that. Just static. I sat back and glanced at Wolfe. He hadn't moved. His eyes were closed and his fingers were steepled against his chest. But I knew better. That was Wolfe's version of high alert. "Well," I said. He opened one eye. "What did you observe?" Chef Melnick threatening a dishwasher who stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to see. Bruno looked scared. That footage might be the last we ever see of him, depending on how far consequences went. Wolfe exhaled through his nose. "What else?" I ran it back in my mind. The location's important. They weren't on the main floor. That was a storage area. Either someone set the phone up in advance to spy, or Bruno knew he'd need a record. Wolfe nodded slightly. And if he felt the need to record it, he did not trust the chef. Smart. "Kid, possibly," Wolfe said. "Or merely scared. You will go to the plancher. Speak with the staff. Confirm Bruno's status. Ascertain Chef Melnick's disposition. Do not mention Mr. Duval or the video. Report precisely what you observe." I stood. "And what will you be doing while I'm playing waiter?" "I shall—" "Remain in my chair," Wolfe said serenely, "as is proper." The Plancher was one of those restaurants that tries too hard, the kind with an open kitchen, a water wall, and a wine list thick enough to stop a bullet. The hostess wore black silk and a scowl, and the clientele looked like they'd have to check their wallets before tipping a valet. I didn't have a reservation, but I did have charm. I gave the name of a fake food columnist, smiled like I'd eaten 1,000 free tastings, and asked to speak to the head chef about a potential feature. It worked. They're always hungry for exposure, especially the type of exposure they can control. Chef Melnick came out after a few minutes. He was tall, lean, and styled to within an inch of his apron. His eyes were sharp, but not friendly. "You're with the Taster's Chronicle?" he asked. "Doing a spotlight on the staff behind the flavor," I said. "You know, the whole brigade, sous-chefs, line cooks, even the dishwashers who keep the machine moving." He stiffened just slightly at that last part. "Dishwashers?" "Sure. Heard one of yours vanished recently." "Bruno, I think." "What happened to him?" Melnick gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Bruno was unreliable, didn't show, up for shifts. When we called, he said he'd taken another job, that's all." I tilted my head. "Didn't pick up his last check, though." "I suppose he will," Melnick said curtly. "Or he won't, not my concern." It was a weak dodge. I let the silence hang. He adjusted his sleeve and said, "If you want quotes, talk to my PR. The kitchen's busy." "Right." "Of course," I said, stepping back. "Just one more thing. I heard a rumor about something being stolen recently, something sensitive. Any truth to that?" Melnick's nostrils flared ever so slightly. "We have security and discretion. I'll thank you not to spread baseless gossip." I left with a smile and a mental note. The man was hiding something, and he was trying too hard not to show it. Back at the brownstone, I gave Wolfe the rundown while he listened, eyes closed again, hands folded. Chef Melnick was stiff, defensive, and clearly lying. He claimed Bruno left voluntarily, but everything about his answers said otherwise. He also dodged my question about something being stolen. Wolfe grunted. "That confirms my suspicion," which is that Mr. Duval did not come to us merely out of fear, Wolfe said. "He came because something valuable is at stake. And yeah, he believes himself at risk. You think Duval's more than just a nervous sous-chef? I think he's involved. Perhaps not culpable, but certainly implicated. People do not risk their livelihoods unless the alternative is worse." I nodded slowly. "So where do we go from here?" Wolfe opened his eyes. "Saul Panzer." That got my attention. Wolfe doesn't call in Saul unless things are about to heat up. Saul's the best operative we've got. If you want subtle tailing, phone taps, or someone to find a man who doesn't want to be found, Saul's your guy. Wolfe continued, "Mr. Panzer will locate Mr. Bruno if he is alive. And if he is not, he will locate his remains." That was Wolfe for you. Casual precision. He could discuss death and miso soup with the same tone of voice. I pulled out my notebook. "You want me to prep Saul?" "Yes. And tomorrow you will. Return to the Plancher, but not as a reporter, as yourself. Won't that put Duval in the crosshairs?" Wolfe shook his head. "Mr. Duval made a calculated move. Now we shall make one of our own." The brownstone had been disturbed, and Wolfe didn't like disturbances. The next morning, I was back at the Plancher. This time with no disguise, no cover story, just my honest Archie Goodwin face and a direct approach that Wolfe would call barbaric if he hadn't quietly approved it himself. The maitre d' gave me a look like I'd tracked mud on the marble, but I was already waving my card before he could pull out his polite refusal routine. "I'm not here to eat," I said. "I'm here to talk." Call your head chef. Or, better yet, your sous-chef, Julien Duval. I think he'll be more cooperative. He didn't move. Is this a police matter? Only if people keep lying, then it gets messy fast. That did the trick. A few glares later, I was led to a cramped corner of the kitchen, part pantry, part prep zone, where Julien Duval stood with a mixing bowl in one hand and tension in both shoulders. "I told you not to come here," he hissed, once we were alone. "And yet here I am," I said. "Wolfe wants more. The chef's lying about Bruno, you know it. So let's get down to it." Duval set the bowl down. "There are things I can't prove, yet. But I'll tell you what I know. Melnick's been jumpy for a week. Before Bruno vanished, there were whispered conversations. One night I stayed late, cleaning the walk-in, and I heard Melnick arguing with someone. It sounded like threats. Money, leverage, something about the contract. Then Bruno was gone. A few days later, that flash drive appeared in my locker. "And you didn't turn it in to the cops?" "I don't trust the cops," he muttered. "I don't know who's involved. Melnick's connected. Money, sponsors, investors. This whole place is an image factory. I could lose everything." "Noted," I said. "Let's talk staff. Give me names." He rattled off 4 quickly. "Maya Reese, line cook, sharp as a razor. Doesn't like Bruno. Said he was lazy, but I think she just hated his attitude. Clive Granger, pastry chef, quiet, but loyal to Melnick. Too loyal. Then there's Leo, the porter, spends more time on his phone than his mop. He saw things. Doesn't talk much, but he sees everything. And Lydia Flynn, the floor manager. She's got Melnick's ear and thinks it makes her queen." "And where do you fit into that palace drama?" I asked. Duval hesitated. "I do my job. I stay out of politics." "Sure. Except you've now tossed yourself into the middle of a scandal Wolfe might turn into a case." "I want the truth," he said. "If something happened to Bruno, if he got hurt because of something he saw, it matters." I studied him a second. Either he was the most convincing liar I'd seen all week, or he was a good man way out of his depth. "I'll need to talk to them all," I said, discreetly. "I'll get you 10 minutes in the break room. Pretend you're with the health department. No one argues with the health department." The break room was a windowless box with coffee that smelled like despair, and a table scarred by knife nicks and marinara stains. I sat and waited. First in was Maya Reese, tall, sharp features, hair pulled back in a net, and the kind of stare that could overcook meat at 20 paces. She didn't sit. "You're not from the health board." "Good instincts. I'm looking into Bruno." She rolled her eyes. "That little punk. What's he done now? Maybe nothing. Maybe something that got him in trouble." She folded her arms. "He was lazy, always ducking out early, but he wasn't dumb. He was always watching, listening like he was storing things up. For what? No idea. But he acted like he had something on someone." "Who?" She paused. "He asked me once how hard it would be to copy the restaurant's supplier contracts, like from the office computer. I told him to get lost." Now that was interesting. Next came Clive Granger, the pastry chef. Mid-40s, neat, soft-spoken. He sat politely. "Bruno's gone?" he asked. "I thought he just quit." "Not officially." "What do you know?" "Not much." I kept to myself. "Melnick's been under pressure lately. Menu changes, investor meetings. Bruno probably got caught in the crossfire." "Crossfire?" Granger blinked. "He was always sneaking around, cleaning places that didn't need cleaning. I saw him once outside Melnick's office late at night. No reason to be there." "Did you tell anyone?" Granger looked down. "No, I didn't want to. get involved. Next, Leo the porter. 19, twitchy and clearly suspicious of me. I don't know anything, he said, before I even asked. Sure you do. You always do. You see things while no one's looking. He cracked a smile. Bruno was scared. That's all I'll say. Scared of who? Leo hesitated. He told me once. If anything happened to him, someone should check the freezer log, that's all. Then he got up and walked out. Last was Lydia Flynn. Blonde, sharp suit, voice like cold tea. If this is about Bruno, I have no comment. Not press, I said. Private investigator? Even worse. You knew him? She shrugged. He was a kid, had an attitude, thought the rules didn't apply. Think he saw something he wasn't supposed to? I think he was always in the wrong place, and I think Melnick is tired of cleaning up messes. She stood. If you're smart, you'll drop this. I'm not known for that, I said. Back at the brownstone, I relayed the full list of names and quotes. Wolfe listened silently while I paced. When I finished, he spoke without opening his eyes. 4 suspects, each with motive, opportunity, or knowledge. Miss Rees feared exposure. Mr. Granger feared confrontation. Young Leo feared involvement. Miss Flynn feared disorder. And Duval, he fears guilt. I sat. So what now? Wolfe finally stirred. Now we rattle the cage. You will call Saul. He is to investigate the freezer log and inventory records of the plancher. Quietly, simultaneously, you will ask Mr. Duval to deliver the full staff roster to me, including those with access to the kitchen computer system. And what are you looking for? A gap, Wolfe said. In behavior, in schedule, in logic. The missing space where truth has been replaced by silence. He stood. That meant things had escalated. The game, he said, has begun in earnest. If Wolfe says the game's begun, then it's time to lace up your shoes and check your wallet, because someone's going to run and someone's going to pay. I called Saul Panzer from the hallway just outside the office because Wolfe doesn't like the telephone interfering with his thoughts, his meals, or his orchids, in that order. I gave Saul the basic brief. Dig into the freezer logs and inventories, records at the plancher, cross-reference supplier entries, and pay attention to the week Bruno disappeared. If anything looked tampered with, digitally or otherwise, Saul would sniff it out. Freezer logs? He asked. You really think a guy went missing in the walk-in? I don't know, I said. But Wolfe thinks there's a gap somewhere, and we don't ignore hunches that come with that kind of vocabulary. Copy that, he said. Give me 12 hours. 12 hours with Saul is like a week with anybody else, so I trusted it would be more than enough. Meanwhile, I called Duval and told him to bring over a staff roster, detailed, full names, positions, access privileges, all of it. He sounded hesitant until I reminded him that this wasn't just about Bruno anymore. Wolfe was involved now, and Wolfe doesn't dabble. He arrived at 3:17 p.m., wearing the same anxious face but a different apron. Fritz didn't let him past the vestibule. Duval handed me the roster without a word and left before Fritz even closed the door. I carried it into the office like it was made of crystal. Wolfe was at his desk, frowning over a copy of Gourmet magazine like it had personally insulted him. List, I said, placing it on his blotter. He glanced at it, then motioned for me to read. 22 names total, I said. Front of, house, back of house, administrative. The ones who had computer access, Melnick, Lydia Flynn, and a guy named Anton Driggs, he's head of accounts and operations. Never mentioned before. Why not? Wolfe murmured. Good question. I kept reading. Duval, Granger and Rees don't have login credentials, Leo the porter has a badge, but it only works on the staff entrance and janitor closet. Bruno, same, restricted access, no office permissions. Wolfe leaned back. Anton Driggs. New name, no visibility. That's a mistake. On their part, I opened my notebook. You want me to track him down? Not yet. We will wait for Mr. Panzer's report. In the meantime, you will call Mr. Duval again. Ask him why this Mr. Driggs was omitted during your prior conversation. I made the call while Wolfe poured beer into his green glass. Duval picked up on the first ring. Anton, he said, confused. Oh, I didn't think he mattered. He handles the books, barely speaks to the kitchen staff, comes in late, leaves early, keeps to himself. Bruno didn't have access to the office. Computer, right? Correct. So how do you know about the supplier contracts? Duval paused. I don't know. Maybe he saw something on paper, or maybe someone showed him. That was enough to chew on. I hung up, filled Wolfe in, and we both let that little worm wiggle for a while. The answer came faster than expected. At 8:43 that evening, Saul called. I've got two things, he said. One small, one weird. Give me the small first. Freezer logs from the plancher show a temporary outage in the temperature monitoring system, 47 minutes, on the night Bruno was last scheduled. There's a manual entry that says, System error, override initiated, signed with Flynn's initials. Lydia Flynn? Yep. But I talked to the supplier's technician. He said override entries aren't standard. You have to request special access from the head office. That meant someone bypassed a system that wasn't supposed to be touched. Now, the weird. In the paper records from that same night, there's a delivery slip from a produce vendor. It says inventory received by BG, but there's no signature, no timestamp, just a scribbled note attached to the invoice. Check back pantry drawer. Drawer? I checked. Back pantry has a storage drawer labeled dry spices. Inactive. Inside, folded behind a jar of dried saffron. A receipt. Dated 2 days after Bruno disappeared. For an emergency cleaning service. I blinked. What was cleaned? The walk-in. Sanitized, deep steam, chemicals. Whole 9 yards. That's not protocol unless something serious happened. You don't sanitize a freezer unless someone bled or spilled poison. I hung up and walked straight into Wolfe's office without knocking. He gave me a look but said nothing. Flynn manually overrode the freezer system the night Bruno vanished. 2 days later, someone called a cleaning crew to scrub it top to bottom. Bruno's initials appear on an inventory slip with a cryptic message after he supposedly left for another job. Wolfe closed his eyes. What did the cleaning service say? They didn't. Saul's pulling their billing records, but he says it was a last-minute rush job. Cash paid, Wolfe exhaled. This is no longer a case of disappearance. It is a case of concealment. That is different and graver. He stood, yes, stood, and paced a slow half-circle around his chair. They tampered with logs. They bypassed protocols. They scrubbed a place meant to store food. Why? To erase something, I said. A body, maybe? No, Wolfe said. If a body were involved, they would not leave gaps. No, this is subtler. They are not hiding violence. They are hiding purpose. That stopped me. You think Bruno saw something planned, and they're burying the reason, not the result. Precisely. Wolfe sat again. We will bait them. Mr. Duval will announce that he has made a second copy of the video. He will say it is stored with counsel. He will imply that he has shared it, and then we shall see who twitches. I'll write the script, I said. And be sure it sounds like a man who is tired of waiting, Wolfe added. No threats, just the gentle application of pressure, the kind that cracks porcelain. I went to the typewriter and composed a message for Duval to send via email. An anonymous one CC'd to a dummy legal address Saul created in 2 minutes. It said, in brief, "I have additional footage beyond what was previously shared. It is stored with representation, along with a letter naming parties involved. If anything happens to me, it goes public. I am done being afraid." Duval sent it at 11:12 that night. By 11:29 we had our first response. A burner phone pinged Wolfe's secure line. The voice was scrambled, but the message was clear. "You've made a mistake. You don't understand what's at stake. Take the footage and burn it. If you want to live, walk away." I glanced at Wolfe. He smiled for the first time in days. "Now," he said, "they are listening. Soon they will act." Wolfe doesn't get rattled by threats. If anything, he treats them like seasoning, expected, necessary, but never overpowering. That call from the burner phone didn't make him blink. What it did was confirm that we'd finally rattled the right branch of the tree. Someone was scared. Someone who didn't want a second copy of that video floating around. And that meant the original video wasn't just a threat, it was a lever. I spent the next morning doing exactly what Wolfe hates, running around town. First stop was Saul's place. He'd already dug into the cleaning service's records. The bill was issued to a shell account, registered through 2 layers of dummy corporations and paid in cash. But Saul's good, too good. He traced the IP address of the scheduling request. It originated from a tablet tied to an account in the name of Anton Driggs. That made things very interesting. Back at the brownstone, I laid the whole chain out for Wolfe, who was working his way through. A bowl of Fritz's carrot soup, like it contained encrypted intelligence. "Anton Driggs," I said. "The ghost in the kitchen, the one Duval barely remembered existed." "He remembered enough not to mention him," Wolfe replied. "You think that's intentional?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that everyone in that kitchen is choosing their silences carefully. Mr. Duval may be honest in fear, but he is not transparent in purpose. What's your take on Driggs?" "Expendable," Wolfe muttered. "He is the sort they do not protect unless he is useful, and they only protect him until he becomes a liability." That afternoon, Saul confirmed Driggs hadn't shown up. At work, since the burner call, he was unreachable, unresponsive, and, according to a neighbor, hadn't returned to his apartment the night before. The neighbor described him as nervous, always watching the hallway. Apparently, the kind of man who double bolts his door even when taking out the trash. I relayed the details. Wolfe listened with eyes closed, breathing slow and measured. "So, they're tying off loose ends," I said. "No," Wolfe replied. "They are preparing for collapse. That is when people vanish, not out of confidence but desperation." At Wolfe's request, I called Duval again. This time, he answered with a trembling voice. "They know," he said. "I got a call from Lydia this morning. She didn't say anything directly, but she warned me to keep the kitchen clean and respect the hierarchy." That's not how she talks. She was, different. "Any sign of Melnick? He hasn't been in the kitchen all day, locked himself in his office." "Perfect," I said. "Here's what I want you to do." I gave him the rundown of Wolfe's instructions. Schedule an emergency kitchen meeting for the staff tomorrow morning. Everyone present. Say it's a team compliance talk for health board readiness. Tell Melnick it's mandatory. Wolfe wanted all 5 suspects in the same room with no time to prepare, no room to maneuver, and nowhere to hide. Duval hesitated, but I pressed. "We're close, Julian." "Really close. Whatever's going on, Wolfe is about to rip the lid off, but we need the pieces in place," he agreed. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. That evening, Saul paid us a visit. He came with a manila folder and his usual poker face. I visited Driggs' apartment. Nobody home, but I got a look through the window. Place was trashed, not ransacked, careful. Drawers empty, computer gone, but nothing broken. That's professional. Someone cleaned him out. Alive? I asked. Hard to say. No blood, no signs of struggle. But the man's been scrubbed. Neighbours said a black car waited across the street most nights this week. Unmarked. Saul dropped the folder on Wolfe's desk. His bank records show one big withdrawal last Friday, 3,000 in cash. After that, nothing. Just a flatline. Wolfe opened the folder, leafed through the papers slowly, then placed a slip of paper on his blotter. Observe, he said. There's the withdrawal, and here, 3 days prior, a small transfer. $98. Odd number, I said. Exactly, Wolfe replied. Which means it wasn't a purchase, it was a test. He was checking if the account was being watched, a decoy action to see who noticed. And someone did, I said. And then he vanished. Wolfe looked at me. They are in motion now, Mr. Goodwin. The pieces are shifting. And soon they will collide. The next morning, I arrived at the plancher 20 minutes early. The kitchen was a flurry of stainless steel and nervous glances. Duval greeted me near the back door. They're all here, he said. Even Melnick, sitting in the corner like a volcano in a suit. I scanned the break room. Lydia was sipping coffee like it owed her something. Maya Reese paced with a cigarette behind her ear. Clive Granger clutched a clipboard like it was a lifeline. Leo was pretending to mop a spot that had been clean since Tuesday. And Melnick? He just sat, legs crossed, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor. I gave Duval a subtle nod. He stepped forward. Thanks, everyone. Just a quick update on compliance measures before the inspection next week. But before we start, I want to share something. They looked at him. I received a threat recently. Someone wanted me to stay quiet. But I've already shared everything I know with legal counsel, with the right people. If anything happens to me or anyone else here, that truth will go public. Dead silence. Then Melnick spoke. Calm. Chilling. You're making dangerous statements, Julian. I'm just protecting myself, Duval replied. Melnick stood. From what exactly? Kitchen gossip? Conspiracy theories? He looked around. This is a restaurant, not a courtroom. No, I said, stepping in. But it could become one real fast. He turned toward me. You again? Me again, I said. And this time, you're out of counter space. Maya Reese rose from her chair. I'm not going down for whatever you idiots have done. I told you from the start. Clean up your mess. Clive blinked. What mess? What are you talking about? Leo looked cornered. You all think this is about the freezer? You think Bruno's not dead? Lydia slammed her mug on the table. Shut up, Leo. Don't tell me to shut up, he snapped. He warned me. He told me. Told you what? I asked. Leo's eyes darted. That there was money changing hands, that the contracts were cooked, that Melnick was skimming supplier invoices and someone was helping him. Bruno found out. He recorded it. Then, poof, gone. I turned to Wolfe's list. And who had access to both the invoices and the kitchen security override? Silence again. Then Lydia. You don't understand, she said. It wasn't supposed to go this far. You know that moment when you're sautéing garlic and it turns just a second too long and suddenly the whole kitchen smells burnt? That's what the break room felt like after Lydia's confession slipped out. Not full admission, but enough to send smoke signals. Everyone froze. You could practically hear the tension crackling above the hum of the refrigerator. Lydia Flynn, floor manager, and Melnick's right hand had just opened the oven door a little too wide. I didn't press her. Not yet. Wolfe would have had my head if I let the pressure valve blow too soon. You never push a confession while it's forming. You let it rise. Melnick stood like a statue, arms crossed, lips pressed so tight they could seal Tupperware. He didn't jump in to cover for Lydia, didn't deny a word. That told me something else. She wasn't going rogue. This was controlled damage control. She was offering a sacrifice, maybe even herself, so the larger machine could keep running. Leo fidgeted in the corner. Clive looked like he was trying to disappear into his clipboard. Maya Reese leaned against the fridge, arms folded, daring someone to drag her into the center of the mess. I pulled out my notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and said, "Why don't we rewind for a second?"
"Lydia, you said it wasn't supposed to go this far. What exactly was supposed to happen?" She hesitated, then exhaled. "Bruno found out about the invoice padding, that's all. Melnick adjusted supplier figures, skimmed funds, funneled
the overage into a side account, probably for investors, bonuses, whatever. I don't know the details. Anton Driggs handled the numbers. Bruno saw something, maybe a printout, maybe overheard a conversation. He confronted Melnick. And then he was warned, sternly, but not threatened. We assumed he'd take the hint and quit quietly. I arched an eyebrow. People don't stash flash drives in lockers and warn porters to check the freezer.
"Log unless they're planning a graceful exit." She looked away. "Then what?" I said again. "I don't know," she muttered. "One day he was here. Then he wasn't. We were told he quit."
Anton said he left a voicemail saying he'd found a better gig and didn't want his last check. I didn't hear it. I didn't ask. "Of course not," I said. "Because you were relieved." Melnick finally stirred. "You're fishing, Mr. Goodwin." "No," I said. "I'm deep in your pantry pulling out rotten onions." Maya broke the silence. "If I may," she said coolly, "this kitchen's been toxic for years.
Melnick runs it like a dictatorship, and the rest of us survive as long as we keep our mouths shut. Bruno poked the bear, and now he's gone." "That's a serious accusation," Melnick snapped. "Is it?" She shot back. "You warned him."
You had the access, you control the cameras, you signed off on the freezer override, and now Anton's gone, and we're sitting here waiting to be next." Melnick took a step forward, then stopped himself. The room went quiet again. I turned to Leo. "You said Bruno warned you. What exactly did he say?" Leo swallowed. "He said if he disappeared, the freezer log would tell the story. That something happened in there. He didn't say what, just that it would explain everything. He said Lydia knew. And Anton, and maybe even Granger." Clive looked up, startled. "Me?" Leo nodded. "He said you saw something on the inventory sheet and never said a word." Clive's face turned the color of curdled cream. I did see something. One line item listed the same produce delivery twice, with different totals. I asked Anton about it. He said it was an input error. I didn't question it. I sighed. "So no one killed Bruno, but everyone helped him vanish by doing nothing."
"Is that the idea?" Nobody answered. I closed my notebook. This isn't a kitchen anymore. It's a mausoleum of plausible deniability, and Wolfe hates mausoleums. I left them stewing in their own guilt and headed straight for the brown stone. Wolfe
was in the plant room, hovering over an orchid like it had personally offended him. I gave him the full report, every word, every look, every silence. He listened without comment, except to grunt softly when I mentioned Lydia's line about things not going this far. When I finished, he straightened up and said, "Mr. Panzer?" still watching Anton's apartment. No sign. "Have him shift focus to Lydia. I want to know who she contacts in the next 24 hours. Every call, every visit. She has assumed partial guilt. That will make her a conduit for the truth." Understood. And Clive Granger? Guilt-stricken?
Weak, a follower, not a leader. Then he will break under pressure. Good. Tomorrow we summon them, I blinked. All of them. All of them, Wolfe said. Here, in the office, 6 p.m.
Under what pretense? Formal resolution, Wolfe said. They believe they are controlling the narrative. We will show them the real story. The next day, the brownstone was unusually lively for 6 in the evening. Fritz nearly had a breakdown trying to arrange refreshments without violating Wolfe's personal code of sanctity. The guests arrived one by one, Melnick in a charcoal suit, Lydia looking like a publicist on the edge, Clive trembling, Maya aloof, Leo quiet as a ghost. Duval came last, nervous but grateful. They sat in the office in a semicircle, while Wolfe stayed seated behind his desk, hands tented, eyes half-lidded. I will not belabor you with pleasantries, he said, voice slow and clear. You are here because you share a lie. Whether you conceived it or consented to it is immaterial. You were all present when a man disappeared, and each of you held a piece of his absence. Melnick opened his mouth, but Wolfe raised a hand. Silence. I do not seek explanations. I seek responsibility. He turned slightly toward Lydia. You initiated the override. You hired the cleaning crew. You spoke to Mr. Duval with veiled warnings. Yet you claim innocence. Then to Clive. You noticed the falsified invoices. You reported them to no one. Then Maya. You suspected corruption, yet remained silent. And Leo, you were given a warning, an explicit cry for help, and you ignored it. Lastly, Duval. You held on to the video until fear outweighed conscience. He paused. You are all guilty, not of murder, of complicity. They squirmed.
Even Melnick. The question now, Wolfe continued, is whether your silence will endure another day. No one moved. Wolfe rang the bell. Fritz entered with a small envelope. Wolfe opened it, withdrew a single sheet. This, he said, is
a notarized statement from Anton Driggs, obtained by Mr. Panzer last night. It details the entire scheme, financial manipulation, falsified supplier contracts, and most crucially, the freezer incident. He placed the sheet on the desk. Driggs was not murdered. He fled. He has confessed in writing. He names those who participated, those who concealed, and those who ordered silence. Wolfe let it hang. Chef Melnick, your kitchen is an empire built on fraud, and now it has collapsed. No one said a word. Dinner was served late that evening. Silence blanketed the brownstone like snowfall. Wolfe sipped beer, and I asked the question. You think Bruno's dead? No, Wolfe said. I think he
ran smartly and gave us just enough to finish what he started. Wolfe was right. Again. Bruno hadn't been silenced. He'd walked out the back door of a crooked kitchen, away from falsified invoices and quietly complicit co-workers. And
while Wolfe didn't normally indulge in hypotheticals, this time he allowed himself one small luxury, an assumption. That Bruno was alive, somewhere, waiting to see if the pieces he left behind were sharp enough to cut through the mess. It was now Friday morning. The storm had cracked, but it hadn't yet poured. Wolfe sat in his chair, his expression somewhere between smug satisfaction and mild digestion, as I updated him on the aftermath. Melnick hasn't shown up to the plancher since the confrontation. Closed his office, sent an email claiming a medical emergency. Lydia's still managing the floor like nothing happened. The staff's shaken but pretending things are back to normal. Saul says Anton Driggs is headed for a quiet deal with the DA, testimony in exchange for immunity. Wolfe grunted. Expected. Duval, on the other hand, says morale in the kitchen has improved. Even Maya stopped threatening to fillet the interns. That, Wolfe said, is irrelevant. I waited. What is relevant, he continued, is that we have not accounted for the final detail, the event in the freezer. You think Bruno faked something? I asked. I think, Wolfe said slowly, that if one intends to vanish, one must leave a trail that is difficult to
follow and dangerous to question.
I leaned forward. You're saying he wanted us to think something happened to him, Wolfe nodded once. Precisely. He ensured the last record of himself was wrapped in mystery, a false trail, a disappearance laced with fear. It kept Melnick and the others paralyzed, afraid to act, afraid to explain. I whistled. Smart kid. Too smart, Wolfe replied. Which is why I am not yet satisfied. He reached into the drawer, withdrew a sealed envelope, and passed it to me. Take this to Saul. Instruct him to locate Mr. Bruno Giles. Use all available means. Discretion is no longer necessary. We require truth. Saul didn't need long. By mid-afternoon, he'd turned up a location, a hostel in Newark operating under the name Jules Grant. Bruno's middle name was Julian. The ID was fake, but cheap, low-effort camouflage for someone trying to stay low, but not completely off-grid. Want me to bring him in? Saul asked. No, I said. Let me talk to him. The place smelled like overcooked cabbage and underpaid maintenance. I found Bruno in the common area, hunched over a laptop, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and a look that said he hadn't slept right in days. He recognized me instantly. Didn't run, didn't speak. I sat beside him and said, Wolfe doesn't want to hurt you. He wants the rest. Bruno stared ahead. They thought I was dead. They were more afraid you weren't. A pause. Then, did he get them? Driggs confessed. Melnick's empire is falling apart. Lydia's days are numbered, but Wolfe wants something only you can give. What's that? The freezer, I said. What actually happened in there? Bruno leaned back, rubbed his face. I had a plan. I knew they were skimming. I saw invoices, heard Melnick and Driggs talking. I copied files onto the flash drive. Then I confronted Melnick in private. I recorded it on my phone. That's the video you saw. And then I knew I had to disappear. If I went to the cops, they'd bury me in legal threats. So I created confusion. I used Leo's badge to access the walk-in, disabled the temperature sensor using Driggs' override code. He wrote it on a sticky note once, and left the delivery slip with my initials on it. Then I walked out the back, tossed my phone in the river, and waited. You wanted them to think you were dead? No, Bruno said. I wanted them to think they didn't know. That way they wouldn't talk. They'd stay busy covering it up, lying to each other. That gave me time. I shook my head. You know that's insane, right? He gave a tired smile. Worked, didn't it? That evening, Bruno sat in Wolfe's office, sipping root beer from a crystal tumbler, while Wolfe regarded him like a gardener sizing up a stubborn weed. Fritz had refused to serve him real beer. He said the boy hadn't earned it. You orchestrated.
An illusion, Wolfe said. A poor one, but effective. You relied on panic, guilt, and incompetence. Bruno nodded. Yes, sir.
You played your employers against each other. You violated procedures, misused credentials, and faked your own disappearance. Yes, sir. You are either reckless or brilliant, possibly both, but you are no longer necessary to my investigation tonight. Stiffened. So I'm free to go? Wolfe tilted his head. You are not a criminal, but you are a liability. I recommend you find employment far from kitchens and fraud. Bruno stood. I understand. As he left, Wolfe turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, Make arrangements. I want every copy of that video destroyed. Driggs's statement will suffice for the police. This boy's theatrics need not linger. What about Melnick? He will fall, publicly, but not by our hand. And Duval? A good cook, Wolfe said. May he stay that way? I leaned back in my chair, watching the steam rise from my coffee. That's it then, case closed? Wolfe closed his eyes. The kitchen is clean, the air is clear, and my dinner is warm. He picked up a fork and added, Justice, Mr. Goodwin, is best served at room temperature. You'd think with the rogue dishwasher located, the false trail exposed, and the kitchen hierarchy shaken to its core, we'd be ready to pull the curtains and let the applause roll in. But Wolfe didn't sit back. He didn't even lean back. That, in Wolfe's world, was the clearest sign the case wasn't over. And sure enough, within 2 hours of Bruno stepping out of the brownstone, Wolfe was back in his chair, arms folded and brow furrowed like someone had served him canned beans instead of foie gras. There is one thing, he said, voiced low, still unresolved. Only one? I asked. Because I've got at least 4, including how Driggs got access to the override code in the first place, why Lydia kept threatening Duval after Bruno vanished, and how Melnick's still not behind bars. All of those will settle themselves now that the web has been shredded, Wolfe replied. What remains is motive, I blinked. You're not satisfied with fraud and panic? No. Wolfe shifted his weight, which for him was like most people running a sprint. The fraud existed before Bruno. It predates the invoices, the
flash drive, even Anton Driggs. Someone else laid the foundation. Bruno's mistake was stepping on a trap someone else set. You think Melnick didn't start this?
I think he took advantage of something already in motion. I started flipping through my notebook. You want to build motive? We need to talk about money. Wolfe waved a hand. Not money. Power. Kitchens, Mr. Goodwin, are fiefdoms. Chefs are not administrators. They are kings. Melnick rules his realm, but someone challenged his rule. That's where this began. Duval? I asked. You think Julian wanted the throne? Not for himself, Wolfe said, but perhaps he helped someone else try. He stared at the ceiling, thinking, and then said, Bring me Miss Reese. Maya? Yes, Wolfe said, and hurry. I dislike dangling threads, especially when they're coated in oil and arrogance. Convincing Maya Reese to leave the Planchet kitchen mid-shift was like asking a surgeon to drop a scalpel during open-heart surgery, but I managed it. She showed up to the brownstone just after 5 p.m., smelling of rosemary, beef stock, and distrust. She sat without being asked, looked Wolfe dead in the eye, and crossed her arms like she expected an ambush. You sent for me, she said flatly. I did, Wolfe said. You may find my questions direct. I'd prefer it, she replied. Very well. When did you first notice irregularities in Melnick's invoice handling? She raised a brow. About 6 months ago. I keep my nose out of accounting, but it's hard to miss when orders stop matching deliveries. Why didn't you report it? Because the only people who'd care were in on it, she said. And because I didn't want to get fired, Wolfe nodded slightly. Did you ever confront Melnick? Once. He told me I'd do well to stick to my knives. Wolfe pressed his fingertips together. And yet you remained. I like my job, she said. And I'm not naive. Kitchens are always messy. The trick is knowing which messes to step over. But you didn't just step over, Wolfe said. You watched, you listened, you collected details, including Bruno's curiosity. She didn't answer. Wolfe went on. You knew he was digging, you saw him snooping, and you warned him, gently at first, then more firmly. Maya shifted. I didn't threaten him. You didn't have to, Wolfe said. You wanted him scared. That way he'd pull back. But he didn't. I wanted him careful, she said. He was a kid, brave but stupid. I tried to keep him quiet. Not because I wanted to protect Melnick, but because I didn't want anyone to end up missing. Did you ever tell Duval? No, she said. I didn't trust him. Why? She paused. Because he wanted to be Melnick, and no one climbs without stepping on someone. Wolfe looked at me, then back to her. Thank you, Miss Reese. That will be all. She stood slowly, eyeing him like she was waiting for a punchline that never came. When the door shut behind her, I turned to Wolfe. Thought you didn't like
interviews. I don't, he said, but she confirmed it. Confirmed what? That the primary conflict was never between Bruno and Melnick.
It was between Melnick and someone closer. Someone who knew how to make corruption look accidental. Someone who could push guilt across the table and walk away clean. Duval, I said. Wolfe nodded. The boy played the middle. He brought us in, yes, but only after the net was already frayed. He made himself useful, but never central. He nudged, never shoved. You think he engineered Bruno's exit? I think he knew Bruno was going to vanish, and he let it happen, because the chaos it caused gave him room to move. I whistled.
And now? He's still there? Still standing? With Melnick out, Lydia compromised, and the staff scrambling, he's the last man upright.
Precisely. I opened my notebook. What do you want to do? Wolfe closed his eyes. Nothing, I blinked. Come again? He has committed no provable crime. He used the collapse to his advantage, but he did not cause it, only managed it. You're letting him win? I'm letting him remain, Wolfe said. Whether that is a win or a curse is no concern of mine. Justice is not always perfect, only symmetrical. He stood, twice in 1 week, which meant the universe was shifting, and walked to the globe bar in the corner. He poured himself a half-inch of Madeira and swirled it. Send Bruno on his way. And remind him, next time he plays with matches, he may not be lucky enough to find firemen instead of wolves. I nodded. What about Duval? Watch him, Wolfe said. From
a distance, men like him rarely stop at one opportunity.
And with that, he turned toward the window, glass in hand, as the evening sun cast a long shadow across the room. Dinner would be served soon. Fritz had roasted duck in the oven, and the scent was beginning to edge its way into the hall. The kitchen was quiet now, the brownstone calmer. But I knew Wolfe was right. Some things don't end. They just wait for the next spark. Duval didn't fall. Not the way Melnick had. He didn't run, didn't stammer through a statement, didn't try to salvage his reputation through media spin or legal acrobatics. He just stayed. Head down, sleeves rolled up, knife in hand. Like the storm had passed and he'd weathered it, barely smudged. The plancher didn't close, it restructured. Melnick resigned due to health, a line so thin you could read shame through it. Lydia Flynn disappeared from the scene entirely, reportedly in quiet talks with counsel, which is New York hospitality speak for dodging subpoenas. Driggs cut a deal. Bruno never came back. And Duval? He stepped into the center like he'd been there all along. The kitchen didn't protest. He was competent, collected, and, after what had unfolded, clean enough to seem like salvation. He wasn't. Wolfe knew it. I knew it. But no one wanted to talk about the blood under the linoleum if it meant the stove stayed hot and the orders kept coming. Still, something didn't sit right with Wolfe. Not the way this story had ended, because it hadn't. Not really. There was no neat knot, no final confrontation in the parlor with gasps and handcuffs, just a quiet shifting of power, like a knife sliding beneath a roast, and lifting the whole thing from the bone. 2 days after our last meeting with Maya, Wolfe asked me to do something I didn't expect. Invite Mr. Duval for dinner. I blinked. You want him here? In your kitchen? In my home, Wolfe said. Fritz will prepare the meal. Duval will not cook and he will not bring wine. He will come empty-handed. And if he says no, he won't. He didn't. He arrived precisely at 7:04 p.m., punctual without being eager, and shook my hand like a man used to keeping knives in his sleeves. Fritz gave him a look that could crack porcelain, but said nothing, nodding curtly and disappearing into the kitchen. Wolfe didn't rise to greet him, naturally. He gestured toward the chair across from him and waited until Duval was seated before speaking. I dislike ambiguity, Wolfe said. I find it inefficient. You, Mr. Duval, have made an art of it. Duval gave a thin smile. In kitchens, ambiguity keeps things civil. This is not a kitchen, Wolfe replied. This is my house. Duval's smile faded. Then I suppose I'm here to be questioned. No, I already have answers, Wolfe said. I invited you here for a different reason. He reached for a folder on the credenza, opened it, and slid a sheet of paper across the desk. Driggs.
Full statement. Redacted, of course. You should read it. Duval picked it up, scanned the contents. I watched his jaw tighten just slightly. When he reached the middle, he says you knew, Wolfe said quietly.
That you saw the cooked numbers, that you approved the hiring of cleaning services, that you handled several supplier calls after Melnick stopped answering them. Duval folded the sheet calmly and placed it back on Wolfe's desk. Not surprised, he said. Driggs would say anything to save himself. Perhaps, Wolfe said. But he also mentioned that the flash drive Bruno left behind didn't just contain the confrontation. It included screenshots, internal emails.
Time-stamped documents. He's lying, Duval said flatly. Maybe, Wolfe allowed.
But then Bruno returned. That was the first real crack. Just for a second. Duval didn't flinch, but the pause that followed was louder than anything he could have said. He's fine, I said. Living under another name. Doesn't
want to press charges, but he wants the truth to breathe. Duval tapped his fingers on the armrest. So what now? You think I'm guilty? I think, Wolfe said, you are opportunistic. I think you saw rot and stepped over it. You didn't.
Cause it. But you didn't stop it, and you used it to elevate yourself. Duval nodded slowly. Then I suppose you'll expose me.
No, Wolfe said. That would be wasteful. Duval blinked. What? You were competent, Wolfe continued. Intelligent, dangerous, but not reckless. You were part of the deception, but not the instigator. The kitchen needed to
fall, but someone needed to rebuild it. Duval stared at him, unsure of what game he was now in. You want to be the chef? Wolfe asked. Duval hesitated. Yes. Then act like one, Wolfe said. Fix what was broken, pay what was,
stolen, and never let someone like Bruno clean up your mess again.
The air went still. Duval finally exhaled. That's it? That's the deal? There is no deal, Wolfe said. There is only judgment. Mine is informal but precise. Your hands are not clean, Mr. Duval, but your intentions may yet be salvageable. Duval stood slowly. Why give me this chance? Wolfe lifted his glass of beer. Because every empire needs a steward, and every steward eventually faces his own Bruno. He turned away, signaling the end. I walked Duval out. He paused in the vestibule, glancing back at the closed office door. He always talked like that? Only when he means it, I said. Duval nodded once, then left. That night, dinner was quiet. Wolfe devoured Fritz's veal medallions with mushroom. Glazed like he hadn't just given a man his fate and told no one, I pushed my plate back. You think he'll follow through? No, Wolfe said, but I think he'll hesitate next time, and that is enough. Bruno's out of danger? Yes, and out of reach. Good. And you're satisfied? I am fed, Wolfe said. That will do. He poured another inch of beer, and in the silence that followed, I realized the case hadn't ended in a bang, or a revelation, or a neat little monologue with a villain in cuffs. It ended with a choice, a private one. A warning passed like a baton. Wolfe hadn't exposed Duval, he'd weighed him, measured the man against the lie, and left him to carry its weight alone. Justice, in Wolfe's world, wasn't always delivered through courtrooms or handcuffs. Sometimes it came on a plate, with a folded napkin, and no room for seconds. If you spend enough time around Nero Wolfe, you start noticing patterns. Not just in crime or people or behavior, though Wolfe could diagram any of those like a blueprint, but in how things settle. Wolfe doesn't chase victory. He doesn't demand justice in headlines or require applause. He demands order. A world where motives lead to choices, choices to consequences, and consequences to balance. By his measure, the matter of the plancher was settled, but for me it hadn't quite clicked. It was 3 days after Duval's visit to the brownstone. When it landed, Fritz was out shopping, which meant lunch was postponed. Sacrilege in Wolfe's temple. Wolfe, seated with his usual girth anchored behind his desk, took this personal offence with predictable disdain. He was rereading Horace, muttering something about indulgence and laziness, when I got a call from Saul Panzer. I think you ought to see this, Saul said. Sending it to your private line. He clicked off before I could ask, and a moment later a file pinged into my inbox. A photograph. A check, made out for $6,400, signed by Julianne Duval. The recipient, the New York Culinary Trust. The memo line, restitution, plancher excess supplier funds. Attached was a brief email from Saul. Anonymous tip, bank verified it cleared. Yesterday. I stared at the screen, then I stood. Wolfe, without looking up, said, "Is it urgent?" "It is," I said. "And interesting." He sighed, closed Horace, and extended a hand. I passed the phone. He read in silence. That was Wolfe's version of a shout. He read the email again, then slowly he placed the phone down and reached for his beer. Restitution, he said. Quiet. Clean. No announcement. Correct, Wolfe said. No announcement, just action. You think it's guilt? No, Wolfe said. I think it's fear, not of discovery, of himself. Mr. Duval understands now that someone is always watching. I nodded slowly. Still, it's more than expected. Yes, Wolfe said, and that makes it tolerable. He poured another inch of beer and said no more. Later that afternoon, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Saul, it was Bruno. He'd found a new place, not in New York, not even in the state. A small town in Vermont, near Lake Champlain. He was going by Julian Grant full-time now, working at a cafe that made its own bread, grew half its produce, and didn't employ anyone who wore a headset. I just wanted to thank you, he said. Don't thank me, I said. Wolfe's the one who didn't feed you to the wolves, he chuckled. Still, it feels like something good came out of it. I guess I never hated cooking. I just hated being afraid. You planning on going back into fine dining? No, he said. I don't need foie gras to prove anything. Turns out customers who smile and tip well are more rewarding than stars in a guidebook. Good, I said. stay away from high-end kitchens for a while, and avoid anyone who keeps separate spreadsheets. Deal, he said, and hung up. That night, dinner at the Brownstone was late, but worth it. Fritz prepared squab in fig sauce, slow-roasted root vegetables, and a saffron risotto that nearly made Wolfe hum. I don't know what he'd been buying all day, but whatever it was had inspired the man. Halfway through the main course, Wolfe set his fork down and leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. "You see," he said, "Bruno attempted justice and achieved confusion. Duval attempted survival and achieved guilt, and the others, Melnick, Lydia, Driggs, they were never thinking beyond the week." He sipped his beer. "Morality," he continued, "is less interesting than discipline. Those with neither perish, those with only one flail. But those with both," he paused, "those endure." I chewed on that. Then I said, "You think Duval's one of those?" Wolfe didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward my plate. "Do eat. Fritz's sauce deserves your attention." So I did. In the days that followed, things settled. The plancher didn't collapse, but it transformed. Melnick's departure became permanent. The press never got the full story, just a line about financial missteps and a re-evaluation of leadership. Duval was named executive chef, and no one publicly objected. Word from the supplier circuit was that payments were now tight, punctual, and exact to the decimal. Lydia Flynn lawyered up and moved on. Clive Granger found another patisserie job in Brooklyn. Maya Reese stayed, her new role expanded. And Leo, he quit, said he'd had enough of kitchens. Last I heard, he was applying to be a park ranger in upstate New York. Said trees were easier to work with than cooks. As for us, we returned to routine. Wolfe took to his orchids with renewed obsession. I resumed fieldwork that didn't involve freezer logs or falsified invoices. Saul got paid, Fritz got thanked, and the office finally stopped smelling like anxiety and saffron. But every so often, a package would arrive, no return address. Inside, a jar of preserves, a sealed packet of local flour, once even a handwritten recipe for maple tarts. Wolfe never acknowledged them, but he kept everyone in a drawer beside his desk. "From Bruno?" I asked once. "Possibly," he said. "Or someone pretending to be him. Either way, the gesture is understood." It was a Thursday when the last string came loose. I'd gone to meet Saul for lunch at Rusterman's, and just as I was finishing a second slice
of cherry pie, he slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Duval's new investor documents, public filing. He's expanding the plancher, a second location, and look at the name." I flipped to the header. "Plancher North, Culinary.
Director Julien Duval, financial patron J. Grant." I let out a low whistle. "Bruno?" Saul nodded. "Clean, legal, anonymous enough not to raise eyebrows, but it's him. Same name he's using in Vermont, same LLC." I leaned back in my chair. "So Duval took the throne, and the kid who fled the kingdom bought him."
"A second one," Saul smiled. "Wolfe's right. It's never about justice. It's about balance." Back at the Brownstone, I told Wolfe everything. He didn't look surprised.
He didn't even look up from the New York Times book review. "People," he said, "are rarely villains or saints. Most are fragments. Flaws, instincts, regrets. It is not our duty to judge them, but to understand their choices." He folded the paper. "Duval chose power," he said. "Bruno chose distance, and we, Mr. Goodwin, chose clarity." He paused, then added, "That is enough." Outside, the sun was setting over the city, casting long, syrupy shadows across the study. Fritz entered with a pot of coffee and a fresh loaf of bread. Wolfe nodded in thanks, took a slice and broke it in half. "Peace," he said, "is not a lack of conflict. It is the knowing of where the fault lines lie and standing just far enough away." I poured coffee for both of us. Still, I said, "You've got to admit this one ended cleaner than most." "No," Wolfe said, "but it ended. That will do." And with that, the matter of the sous-chef who knew too much was officially off the menu. Spring came late that year, the kind of slow thaw where New York's grime slinks off the sidewalks, the sun starts flirting with the windows again, and Fritz reintroduces fresh herbs to the kitchen like they've returned from exile. Inside the brownstone, everything was back to order, orchids in bloom, Wolfe anchored in his chair, and me flipping through overdue bills we were, once again, fully able to pay. The plancher case, as Wolfe referred to it, when he referred to it at all, was done. But not closed, because unlike our usual clients who came in demanding answers or justice or revenge, this case came to us like a scent from a nearby stove. It wandered in, and once it did, it never quite left. Bruno Giles, alias Julian Grant, hadn't contacted us since the last note of Vermont flour arrived in a neat brown envelope. No return address, just a folded slip of paper tucked inside the bag. The bread rises best in silence. "Thank you, Jay, we kept it." Wolfe filed it in a drawer he rarely opens, not out of sentiment, he'd scoff at that, but because even he knew there was a certain neatness in remembering where a knife had once hung, even if it was no longer in the drawer. Julien Duval remained in power at the plancher, and power suited him. He wasn't flashy. He didn't go on TV or write memoirs or launch a line of signature cookware. But word trickled through the restaurant circuit. Consistency, improvement, a surprising increase in staff retention. Even some Saul reported that the investors, who once tolerated Melnick's excesses because he charmed critics, now preferred Duval's quiet competence. That, Wolfe noted, was the most damning praise of all. One Friday afternoon, while I was cleaning, the revolver I kept in the desk drawer, don't ask, Fritz entered with a small square parcel wrapped in butcher paper.
No note, no return address. Inside, a single item, a jar of saffron pickled onions, the kind Bruno used to make back when he thought being a dishwasher in a high-end kitchen was his way up in the world. Wolfe looked at them, didn't smile, didn't
comment. Just opened them, sniffed once, and passed them to Fritz without a word. I raised an eyebrow. From him. Wolfe didn't answer, which of course was an answer. Later that evening, while finishing dinner, braised lamb, lentils, and a sauce that could make grown men confess, I asked Wolfe the thing I'd been chewing on for weeks. Did we win? He didn't look up from his plate. That depends. What was the game? I don't know, I said. That's the problem. We didn't get hired. We didn't send anyone to jail. We didn't even publish a report. Nor did we collect a fee, Wolfe added dryly. Right, I said. So? Wolfe dabbed his mouth and leaned back. Bruno survived, Duval changed, the corrupt fell. That, Mr. Goodwin, is more result than most expect from justice. You think Duval will stay clean? I think he'll remember, Wolfe said. That's all anyone ever does. The smart ones remember what almost cost them. The rest, they repeat. I finished my drink. What about us? We are what we always are, Wolfe said. Present, watching, listening, and available, I nodded. Outside, the city buzzed. Somewhere uptown, chefs prepped for the dinner rush. Somewhere downtown, a young man poured maple syrup over toast and smiled at a kitchen without surveillance cameras. And in a modest brownstone on West 35th Street, the world returned to its natural, peculiar order. Wolfe opened his book. I returned. To my notes, no applause, no headlines, just the flavor of truth left to simmer until it spoke for itself.